Okay, today I want to talk about subpersonalities. Why do we have them? What can we do about them? And in this channel, I like to talk a lot about in Psychologix, how we use our mind. And I'm telling you, you can't really fully use your mind unless you become aware of subpersonalities. If you just think that you're just this conscious you, well, you got some lessons to learn because you're many yous, and you got to learn about the different yous and what to do with them. So we think about the mind and how we're going to use the mind and program the mind. We start off with good old Sigmund Freud. And Freud, of course, is the father of psychoanalysis. He was a Austrian neurologist, comes psychoanalyst. He created psychoanalysis. And basically, he came up with the idea of a conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious mind. We would now probably use the term subconscious these days mainly. So conscious is you, the ego. The pre-conscious is things like your memories at the hypnagogic stage between waking and sleeping. It's got a lot of memories and wider perceptions, like you'll actually be perceiving things literally, physically at your preconscious mind, but you might be exactly aware of them, but they're there. And they pop in a kind of wider consciousness. And then we got the unconscious, which is basically a storehouse of thoughts and feelings and memories and habits, and also all those neuroses, which Freud used to talk about, that people are very repressed. They have all sorts of hurt feelings and so on, and that creates other psychological problems. We also have Carl Gustav Jung, who was the golden-haired boy of the psychoanalytical movement. So Freud, he was basically a neurologist. He wanted to be a professor of neurology, but was told by his professor that as a Jew, he wouldn't have no, in Austria at the time, around, 1890s or something, he wouldn't never make it as a professor. So he's told to go to private practice, which he did, and he strived very hard to create psychoanalysis. And he was very patriarchal in a way. He's very 100% believing in what he did. And he's a very interesting character. He's very defensive of his theories, but he was surrounded by a bunch of guys, acolytes as it were, who are also very bright guys. And the brightest star in that firmament was Carl Gustav Jung. And they're interesting characters because Carl Gustav Jung is an extrovert, whereas Freud was an introvert. And Carl Gustav Jung was more intuitive and creative, and Freud was more analytical. So they're like two sides of the same coin. So what Jung adds to the equation, you have here in all chaos there's a cosmos, and all disorder a secret order. So what Jung adds to the equation is this idea of not just the ego and the personal unconscious, but you also have a cultural unconscious, a collective unconscious. And so we have whereby we're all connected in this collective unconscious. In other words, that, and this is where it gets a bit mystical, that we're all connected. That this is where you get the idea of zeitgeist, of certain world movements and so on, or how certain, inventions are made at the same time, or discoveries are made at the same time, because we're connected in some way, okay? And so in that, you would have the idea of archetypes, which are kind of like things like the hero and the heroine and the old man and the hag and so on. And that's why stories tend to have stereotypical elements. Wherever you go, you'll find there's always a hero in legends, and fiction stories have certain patterns in them. Okay, so anything that's archetypal will appeal to people because we're basically connected at some deep inner level. So basically, a structure is the persona or ego, the self, the shadow, and the inner world. Now I'll get onto the shadow again in a little while. It's basically that which you disown, which you cannot deal with. But you also mentioned the anima and the animus. So the anima is like the ideal woman for the man, animus the ideal man for the woman inside her psyche. So when a man is chasing after, say, an ideal female partner, he's looking for an ideal balancing aspect of himself, and vice versa for ladies. We'll get back to the shadow in a minute because the shadow is very relevant in dealing with the personalities. Bob Proctor, I know you probably remember him from The Secret, and I know you might be thinking, yeah, cheesy kind of guy that has expensive courses. Well, he's passed away now, but yeah, I agree, cheesy kind of guy that had some courses, but he had some very interesting understanding of not just the law of attraction, but how the mind actually works. Law of attraction course, so you attract things to you. So we see here, see yourself where you want to be, and then be there. Don't be in the past, be there. Act like the person you want to become. Bob Proctor. Okay? So that's the whole idea of programming your mind, because your mind doesn't know the reality. It's like many years ago, I was in the gym, I was talking to one guy, and he says, don't worry about the weight on the bar. Your muscles don't know how heavy it is. It's how much resistance you put on the muscle, not necessarily the actual physical weight. So there's different ways, like you can do rest pause or high reps or slow movements or whatever it is. It's the same thing here, that you're creating your reality. So we really have to program our unconscious mind or subconscious mind, as we tend to call it these days. So basically, your future is being created by a thing called a paradigm. But I'll get back to that in a second. This is also all relevant, by the way. So here's his idea. So we have this is the conscious self, and this is the subconscious or unconscious self. And so basically, we're being programmed early in life. We'll also get out of that later. But what's very important here is that if the thoughts or conscious thoughts and your inner programming, which is also known as the paradigm, which is the story you tell yourself, if they are congruent, if they're in alignment, then you will attract things to you. But if you think one thing and believe another thing, then you're going to have a lot of problems. Let's say, for example, somebody, they want to stand up and speak in public. They think they can do it, but then when they go to do it, they don't believe they can do it. Now they get a problem. We see this a lot where people are thinking, I want to be successful in some aspect of life, but they don't believe they can be successful. And now they either self-sabotage themselves or mysteriously things don't go their way because they're not actually in alignment, okay? So this moves on to the concept of paradigm. So you look at this earlier diagram we had up here. This is a conscious mind, that was a subconscious. But the young child doesn't really have a conscious mind. And this is what I really like about the Bob Proctor stuff, has how he describes it. Because we actually develop the conscious mind over time. And around 7 or 8 years of age, we reach what's called the age of reason, around 3rd or 4th grade, when the little child starts rationalizing and understanding, maybe I should sit at my desk rather than jump and stand on my desk. Maybe I should do my homework. Maybe I should be a good boy or a good girl. So you can say to like a 3-year-old you're bad, and they'll just say I'm bad. But you say you're bad to a 10-year-old, they might think twice about it, think, am I really bad? So they're starting to get discernment. So the thing is, after that 7 or 8, the young person will start thinking about, should I accept what the other person said? But when you're like 3 years of age, you just accept whatever. So if we go back to the earlier diagram, back here, we'll see that we're being programmed early in life. And that's creating, that programming is creating the paradigm or the story. And so what are the paradigm? Well, paradigm is a story you say to yourself. So things like your self-image, money, weight, success, relationships, confidence. Paradigm is what you believe in. And that's being created basically early in life. So Inside Out movie, we have a bunch of, you might saw this, I think it's 2015. It's about this little girl who goes to San Francisco, and these are all her subpersonalities, okay? So this is the whole subject here we're talking about. So we have discussed fear, sadness, joy, anger, and so on. So what's the story with the subpersonalities? How are they coming about? So here's the thing. We get back to this diagram here. We got the ego, the conscious mind, and the subconscious mind, the paradigm. I'm calling it subconscious because people tend to call it that these days, even though Freud and Jung would have called it the unconscious. So the paradigm is the life story you believe to be true. We have arbitrary programming, external mind programming. So things like your parents, your family members, TV, media, what's happening around you. So things like your auntie keeps saying negative things, your mom keeps saying negative things, your dad says negative things. This is programming you in a negative way. We also have things very simply. Let's say you go to school, like you're 3 years of age, 3 or 4 years of age when you go to school and they say sit down. You're actually telling a very young child who wants to explore to sit down. They don't like it, but they accept it because they can't not accept it because they're a very small child. But it creates the impression in their mind that somehow they're naughty and they must do the right thing. That small 3 or 4 year old kid wants to grab some pot of hot water and the mom shouts, don't do it, because they're going to hurt themselves or they're going to run across the road and get hit by a car. The dad says, stop. Now, we don't be all softy and say, hello, my darling, please stop. You're going to get hit by a car. We just shout at them, don't we? And the problem is that starts creating this inner programming, which creates a thing called the inner critic. And the inner critic is basically a conglomerate kind of subpersonality of all the negative things that we've been told about ourselves. And finally, we have the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist is the spirit of the age, the groupthink, the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history as shown by the ideas, beliefs of the time. So even if you try and raise your kid in isolation from everybody else, you'd be surprised how their thinking and approaches seems to match as many other people of this youth. So in other words, what's happening around us will affect us, okay? That there's certain energies in the air, as it were, and that also has an effect on our program. So you're programmed all over the place. And it's not all negative programming. Much programming can be positive, but a lot of it's, because it's arbitrary, it can be an issue. We get projections. This is where our programming gets so big that we start to project outwards, and we create things called subpersonalities. So we have, like here in this diagram, you have Mr. Angry, and we got Miss Sad Auntie, and Inner Critic, and Be Happy, and we might have that very supportive person. We might have that favorite school teacher or best friend. We might also have that bully. So we internalize these things, and they then get projected outwards. So if there's enough programming, that thing it starts to get projected outwards as an actual personality. Now, this thing of subpersonality is quite amazing, is that even something as simple as you watch a TV program and you start getting very interested in the characters, and when the TV program's not on and you're walking around the place making a cup of tea or something, you're thinking about those characters. Well, those characters, and maybe you're having conversations with the characters or imagining how the characters could be conversing with each other. They're now subpersonalities in your head. To some degree, they're little mini subpersonalities. But we're not too worried about things like TV programs because these are a very small thing. But if you get a lot of programming over time, it develops like its own little life, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that's when we really say it's a full-grown subpersonality. So things like the inner critic, you're bad, you're stupid, you're a fool, you never achieve anything, that's like a full-grown subpersonality. Things like I can never succeed, that's I can never win. That's, again, it's another subpersonality, but it's like a sad subpersonality, okay? And then maybe another aspect of yourself, maybe you can, you will, etc. Okay? Again, another subpersonality. I'd also like to add in here something with Gestalt psychology, which is very interesting. Gestalt was created in 1890, and it's a bit different. They don't believe in the conscious and unconscious. They just believe in experience, in perception, and that we're limiting ourselves to not perceiving. And they have a radically different way of thinking about the mind than, say, the Freudians or the Jungians. But I think it's still very relevant, because what they're basically saying is that we're not aware of our perceptions, that we're in some way deflecting the perception, putting it off somehow, or maybe we're kind of tuning out of it to some degree. And one of the ideas they have, which I think is very interesting, is the idea of introjection, okay? So they would say things like, if mom and dad are shouting when you're a small kid, you might get an introjection, like that anxiety will then hit you and affect you in some way, and it will damage your conscious awareness in some way, and you will learn to maybe not feel so much, or you will learn to not be aware of certain things and so on. And Gestalt therapy helps people become more aware, usually in a group setting, through kind of group therapy. And I tried it, and I found it very interesting. Like, you have quite strong perceptual shifts when you try it. So the basic thing is, when the subpersonality develops, so you've got a full-size subpersonality, it now, by introjection, it now becomes part of your mind. So you get the idea that what we start with is we are starting with this overflowing of programming, which is creating something that starts to have a life of its own. And then this thing then, by introjection, takes a permanent residency inside your own mind. And this is why you go to do something like, you go for an interview and there's this subpersonality saying you can't do it. You go to talk to somebody you want to have a romantic relationship with, and you find yourself, again, not being able to ask, or struggling to ask. You want to stand in public and give a talk and your knees are knocking. These are all subpersonalities. I mean, if you look at small kids, they don't really suffer from any of this. They really just go for it. I want to be an astronaut, I want to climb a tree, whatever. They just believe totally. But by 7 years of age, this is all shifted. And we see a very strong shift by the time you hit about 14 or 15, when the teenage mind kicks in, the sort of adult mind starts to kick in, and they start getting a lot of anxieties and disabling beliefs. And they're just beliefs, thoughts inside your head, these subpersonalities. And so if we want to fix ourselves, if we want to be better people, if we want to be happier people, if we want to be more successful people, we really have to do something with the subpersonalities, because these are really, really driving you, whether you realize it or not. They have a very, very big effect on who you are. This is a fascinating subject as well, I really think so. So what are we going to do with these subpersonalities? Okay, so of course this little picture here is going to fracture itself. If you go deep into it, of course, you have people with multiple personalities, in which case it's like the subpersonalities are taking on a life of their own. But to some degree, we're all fractured. And I'll give you an example of that. Is you talk to somebody, they seem very nice, and next second they're triggered and they turn into a bit of a maniac. They're shouting, they're screaming, they're beating their chest. And if you've been around the world for a while, you meet so many people like this that they're very nice, but then in some way or other you cross some line and they become emotional, angry, whatever. So what's actually happened is one of their subpersonalities has popped out, rather a negative one. Maybe, repressed anger or something like that. But some kind of subpersonalities come out. And of course, say for example, a person's an addict and they can't control their addiction. Well, that's also like a subpersonality. The subpersonality that, so you talk to the person, seem very nice, and next thing you bring them to a bar, next thing you turn into some kind of, like heavy drinker type, and they seem to have a different personality. So it's like different aspects. So we all human beings are basically fractured. And to some degree, we can't cure that fracturing of our personality. But if we want to lead a happy life, we have to have some degree of reintegration. So how the hell are we going to get it? So basically, one of the things I noticed with subpersonalities is if you got a very well-defined subpersonality, and like I said, we're getting subpersonalities all the time, little small ones come and go. But if they're strongly implanted in you, like your favorite school teacher, your mom, your dad, some strong inner critic, or even maybe somebody who inspired you a lot and is a very good subpersonality, not all bad. So you can't get rid of them, but you can shrink them, because it's repeated thought that really boosts them. It's energy follows intention. If you keep thinking a certain way, you're boosting that. So we give an example here. We got over here, we got Mr. Angry. You are not worthy. You will never amount to anything. Okay, this is like somebody like an external critical figure giving out to you. Here is an internal, so this is like an external critic. Like I said, the inner critic is like a conglomerate of all the negative statements people said. And some of those things people said, they really didn't like you. And sometimes they're actually trying to help you, but you're a small kid and you just took it very personally. This is more like the sad aspect. When you're like a small kid and they won't pick you for the football team. Remember when I was a kid, I was terrible at football. And in Ireland, everybody's football. I was always the one left at the end because nobody would ever want to pick me. So I'm scared. I can't win. I feel lonely. Okay, so this is somebody talking to you, and this is you talking to yourself. And then we have this guy here. He's like Mr. Positive. All the positive people. I'm a good person. I like people. I can do it. It could be, in this particular case, it's I'm good, but also it could be a personality that says that you are good. So it's kind of a mix, but we see this good personality is kind of a weak influence. You get stronger from these two. And just don't think it's just Mr. Angry or Mr. Sad. It's not like that. There could be dozens of different subpersonalities, and different people have different ones. But the key here is that it's negatively influenced by subpersonalities. These negative ones are dominating, okay? So let's take a look what we can do here. Let's say we can boost this guy by thinking in a positive way, and we reduce these guys so that they become smaller. So we get our inner paradigm starts to become something like, I'm a good person, I like people, I can do it. This is a positive subpersonality management, okay? So it's that simple. You just need to boost the positive and reduce the negative, okay? Another aspect of these, so one level is don't be thinking too much of a negative things. Try and stop yourself thinking negatively. And then there's another way of thinking about it, okay? Okay, let's just talk about the shadow first. So the shadow self, this is in the Jungian psychology, that which you're not aware of, because most people don't know they have all this stuff in their head, but it's affecting them. And so if you don't know about it, it doesn't matter. It's still affecting you, okay? It's like if you're running an office somewhere or a shop, and somebody's inside one of your employees is emptying the cash register every day and taking money out, but you don't know it. You're still losing money. You just don't know you're losing money. So the thing with the shadow is that which you're not aware of, it dominates you. It has a big effect on you and is driving you in some or other way. And that's the shadow self. So what Jung would say is we have to become aware of this. And so this is where you get to reflection. We can start to understand their subpersonalities through self-reflection. And maybe you can't unravel it all, but the more light we can throw on the subpersonalities, the more light we can throw on those issues and so on, the stronger we are. Okay, so I think this is a good little picture here. So we got this, this nice picture of a kid, and he's got all these little subpersonalities. And the real question here is, look who's talking, okay? Which subpersonality is talking? Who is in the driving seat at the moment, okay? And so if we see this one here, I just highlight these ones. This guy here, maybe Mr. Suspicious, maybe Miss Disgust, she's disgusted by things. So obviously we can reduce their dominance. We can reduce Mr. Suspicion's dominance, for example, by every time we get suspicious, we downplay it, okay? So it starts to become weaker. Every time we're disgusted by something, we downplay this one and it becomes weaker, okay? I'm just making this stuff up. You can put any label on for these, for whatever your one is. But another thing we could do is we could also talk to, like this is a chair exercise you can do. You can take a chair and talk to an empty chair and talk to your subpersonality. You could ask Mr. Suspicious, why do you feel suspicious? You could ask Mr. Disgust, what do you feel disgusted by? So on one level, you can reduce their influence. You can reduce their dominance by basically being aware and redirecting your thought. But also, another thing you can do with them is ask them, because they actually are real beings. They are little mini egos. They are just like you, but they're a smaller version of you. It's really, really weird stuff. If you really want to get more into this, go watch that movie from 2015, Inside Out. But really, it's pretty wild stuff, okay? So I just wanted to talk about that. I just want to put that out there. It's so very relevant and so very important. How do we deal with the subpersonalities? And the two major takeaways I would say is you can reduce their strength by becoming aware of them and making a point of not dwelling on them, because they rely upon their existence because of you. You keep them in existence by your thoughts and your feelings. And if you reduce your thoughts and feelings, their existence becomes like a shadow, like really a shadow of the shadow self. The shadow self, and that aspect of the shadow self becomes a shadow, becomes very non-dominant. So we can reprogram ourselves that way, but also we can also talk to them and find out what their needs are. Because if you've got one part of yourself that's disgusted, another part suspicious, another person scared, you can ask what their needs are. You can also ask the positive subpersonalities. You know, like this guy over here looks quite friendly with a little hat on and stuff like that. And you can ask this guy what his need is, okay? This guy here with the hat, he looks quite friendly. You can ask what is his need. So what you're trying to do is reduce the negative and increase the positive, okay? It's a vast subject. I know after this, if you've been this long in the video, you might be thinking, my God, what's all this about? It is a vast subject, and there's a lot of subtlety to it, and nobody has all the answers. But I thought I'd just give you a bit of a heads up if you really want to know how to make the most of yourself, because you're not really just one self. There's actually many selves knocking around in there as well as you. Basically, you are in the driving seat. You're the boss in this lifetime, but there's a whole bunch of you knocking around in the background. Please like and subscribe if you like the video, and I'll talk to you next time.